I think what I'm disturbed with is I really wanted to like this film.
Yeah,
Like I
sure.
really wanted to like it. And even when it got to, I kid you not, James, I think I messaged you at one point, watching Frankenstein, not very good, or something like that, something
Right.
very cryptic. And then
That's not
it
very
came up to,
cryptic. You're
well,
not very good.
good.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit.
So, Steve,
You will
finally dropping
be.
on Netflix this weekend, Guillermo del Toro's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This feels like a film that's been around already for a while. I know it's played like at a few festivals. I actually saw it at a festival in Busan. It's now on Netflix, and you've seen it.
Yeah. I'm finding increasingly, although Guillermo del Toro gets a lot of accolades and he's known for his cinematography and storytelling, I'm realizing I just don't connect overall with this guy. I enjoyed Labyrinth, and it was a wonderful, visual spectacle. But I probably didn't connect with it the level that people were giving it accolades. And then Shape of Water, a few years later, wins Best Picture. And essentially, it's about a woman who screws a fish, which
Yeah.
I still struggled to connect those dots in any meaningful way. And then he came out with his Netflix kind of Twilight Zone series of Cabinet of Curiosities.
Mm.
And if I'm honest, I was underwhelmed by that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go into Frankenstein with just fresh spectacles on. I want to like this. I like Oscar Isaacs. I love the story, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Let's do this. So it's Friday night, last night. It dropped on Netflix. And I was again underwhelmed, mildly disappointed, and left thinking that opportunity was left on the table. What say you?
Right. When I heard that Guillermo del Toro was making Frankenstein, I was like, yeah, well, yeah, of course he is. This feels
Mhm.
like the movie that was sort of born to make.
Yeah.
Uh, and it also feels like for sadly to his detriment that it's the film, among others, that he's been plundering his entire career,
Mhm.
to the point that when he gets to finally actually tell the story, what has he actually got left to say? It feels like he's
Mhm.
like cherry picked so many sort of key elements of the story, not least the idea of the misunderstood monster.
Mhm.
The monster who really has a heart and that we should care about, which is funny because it's kind of like what bothered me about the new Predator movie as well. It's like
Yeah.
I don't need to give a shit about the emotional backstory or baggage of a predator, but so many of his films are about sympathetic monsters or misunderstood monsters,
Right.
whether literal or figurative. That by the time you get and then he's sort of lifted far more sort of superficial elements, of it as well. Sort of that by the time you get to this movie, it kind of feels like the toy box is empty already, and that
Right. Right.
all of the feelings and thoughts and ideas that he's had related to this story, he's used already, and that
The
even
air's
he runs the risk of repeating himself at this stage.
Yeah. Well, the air was definitely let out of the balloon at some point in this, where there was just nothing left there, and I just found some of the characters were just caricatures of characters.
Mm,
The female lead, Mia Goth's character.
mm,
I mean, I'm seeing The Shape of Water again. I'm not seeing why she is so attracted to the monster. To have a sympathetic disposition,
mm.
yes, but this was bordering on erotic romance, and there should be none. The same way with The Shape of Water. When it's a fish, there should be none. When it is a put together monster that has been assembled from different body parts and electrified to life, there should be no romantic interests. It's just not going to gel. And anything that tries to convey that immediately gets dismissed in my head is weird, unrelatable, and I have no connection to it whatsoever. If she had been more inclined towards, do I go with this brother or that brother, and torn between the brothers, that's real to me.
Right.
But oh, I've got a thing for the monster. I'm thinking, what? This is, and that is just one of the many critiques I have with this film.
I mean, I'm willing to sort of open my mind and open my arms wide and be like, okay, this is fantasy. This is a fable. This is a fairy tale, essentially. I mean, when you're talking about sort of a simple girl falling in love with a monster, I mean, it's Beauty and the Beast. We've seen it in Edward Scissorhands. We've seen it, in Shape of Water.
Yeah.
I'm willing to open myself to the possibility that there are women out there, or just people out there, who are willing to look beyond the surface. I mean, I'm married, for God's sake. Somebody out there has a big heart who has looked
Yes.
beyond all the superficial flaws and found something in beneath the surface worth showing sympathy and empathy for.
James,
So
I'm the first to say that you have personal experience with having a beauty marry the beast. Okay, I can
thank
see
you very
that
much.
element.
I will never hear
But-
anyone talk to my wife about that like that.
But I would argue, though, the Edward Scissorhands character and the Beast in Beauty and the Beast actually
Yeah.
have human traits all from the beginning. Whereas Victor, no, that is not something you get attracted to. I would concede by the time the monster develops to having rational interchange and exchanges very late in the film, then I could see the possibility maybe developing there. And that's where, in my opinion, the movie should have been earlier, because you said how you were a little bit miffed about the idea of the misunderstood creature. I don't have a problem with that because I've read the original novel, and it's a huge dialogue of creator with the created, and who's responsible for what and who does what. And I was looking for more of that. At the very end of the film, we got just a sprinkling of it. And I kept thinking, why did you save it to the very end for this dialogue? This should have been going on from the beginning with plot twists going alongside that dialogue all the way. But instead, there just became this very two-dimensional relationship between the creator and the created that took up most of the film. And it's mostly we're left at the beginning, and for most of the movie, of a creature in pursuit of its foe. And
Right.
it only develops at the very end into something a little more complicated, a little more developed. And by then, for me, it was too late.
I mean, this is a novel that was written 200 years ago and is one of the absolute pillars of horror and gothic literature, and rightly so. It's a fantastic book. Not only did it conjure up incredibly horrific ideas and imagery, but it's incredibly intelligent, incredibly high-minded, philosophical debates about man's relationship with God. Really, it's like the creator and the created and the responsibility. At the end of the day, the central premise is: does God have a responsibility, or where does God's responsibility for humanity end? Really, God created man, and should he then bear the responsibility of how man behaves after that, or let it go? And man's frustration with the absence of his creator. And that has been made flesh, and in a way that also raises moral questions about should man attempt to mirror God by creating again, and that's just the beginning of where the book dares to go. And it's why it caused such a sensation when it came out, because it was still at a time when Darwinism was it pre?
Yeah.
It might have even been pre-Darwinism. It's around the same time. Don't quote me on that.
I think it's around the same time.
Kind of maybe around the same time, but certainly when ideas like that, ideas of science outshining sort of creationism, were shocking notions to even present, and it is inspired so much sort of philosophical and intellectual debate, on top of the fact that it's obviously sort of inspired generation upon generation of sort of horror storytellers and filmmakers. I mean, the story itself has been told and retold probably more than any other, except possibly Dracula, the other great one. Although I will fight for Frankenstein as a better novel over Dracula every day of the week. I think Frankenstein is a much better book than Dracula, but maybe that's a debate for another day.
That's interesting. You got my head spinning, and don't distract me from this movie.
But and Guillermo del Toro is front and center as one of those people. I mean, he has done great things to legitimize horror cinema, fantasy cinema, and gothic cinema into the mainstream, into the sort of critical upper echelons in the last kind of couple of decades since he kind of emerged with films like Kronos and The Devil's Backbone. And he will always be hugely respected and given his plaudits from me for that. That said, I have always had a slight emotional disconnect with his films. There is no doubt in my mind that his passion for this stuff is self-evident. It is all up
No.
there on screen. I mean, the attention to detail, the costumes, the sets, the lighting, the mood, the tone of it, all, exudes just, he is so in love with this. He almost recognizes this as the real world as opposed to some kind of fantastical environment. And wants nothing more than to draw his audience into that and experience it and respect it and sympathize and empathize with it to a degree that he has felt we have never given it. But I feel that there has always been a lack of genuine emotional sort of resonance with the finished product and me as a viewer watching it. I appreciate the craft. I occasionally love the craft. And I appreciate the intention and the effort, but almost every time, certainly in his more recent, bigger movies, we've talked about Nightmare Alley on this channel, Shape of Water particularly, and here I'm not feeling an emotional response, and this is material for which I have previously had on numerous occasions an emotional response to. And I'm just not getting it here.
I resonate with everything you just said, James, and I agree. But another one of my critiques is as well known as Del Toro is for his cinematography and his visual spectacle, and there's definite elements of that, like in the castle and putting together the contraption which is going to bring the creature to life. I thought a lot of that was visually stunning, and I'm quite happy to be drawn into that world. And those are the elements that I did enjoy. Having said that, though, I thought the CGI in this movie was pathetic. I thought from the opening scene with the ship on the ice that looked like a soundstage to these wolves that looked like they came out of a 1990s computer video game, I was just really disappointed in some of the tonal direction that Del Toro took with his CGI. I would have got rid of it altogether. There's elements in the fire and with the collapsing that I'm thinking is done so much better with tactile special effects that has less spectacle and yet more reality. Whereas I'm watching a cartoon for a split second and then it goes back to a movie. And I found that very disappointing.
Yeah, I think that's fun. And I think that the Netflix platform does not help that. I think that the Netflix platform gives everything a kind of sort of red, muddy sort of finish. And to the point where it's been discussed a number of times, like sort of why Netflix movies look like that. And it must be something to do with the platform itself and the way that it renders the stuff and the way that it delivers it on the platform. I mean, because I was lucky enough to see this on the big screen, and it did.
Oh, you did? Oh,
Yes.
okay. That's interesting. I'm wondering if that would have changed anything because I was disappointed on the small.
Yeah, it does feel sort of wasted on the small screen because the one thing that the film I felt did do was look great. Some of the set designs, like his lab with that huge, just kind of like pit.
That's what I mean. I liked that
in the middle.
There was some great set design. It was beautiful to look at until it wasn't.
Right.
And there was too much of oh, that's great. Oh, that's not good. And that kept doing that. So.
And I think that all of that is valid, and I would be quite sort of. This is the thing you always hear about this with the Netflix. It's like, these films deserve to be on the big screen. Why would the filmmaker do this? It's like, well, the filmmaker understands the deal. This is how you get your film made. Is that Netflix has either bought it after the fact, in which case, fair enough. But in most part, they're actually financing these projects, and know full well that these are basically going to go straight to their platform, and that's the only way that they're going to be seen. So the deal going in. But this does feel like a film that, to give it its best chance, and because I think that it's a film with a lot of flaws, that really does, in many ways, doesn't do justice to the material. It doesn't seem nearly as interested as it should be in those big philosophical questions, beyond the fact that it's just like, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
very.
which is
I found the arguments were very two-dimensional
yeah.
and not things that we haven't seen in films before. And I think because the Frankenstein story is so familiar and so well known, and we know certain beats so well, it's incumbent on the filmmaker to shock us with some disruption to those beats at times. And I felt like whenever he went for a disruption, it was just more of a spectacle is the wrong word, but just something that was just a flash, and then it was over. Not something that really left me going, wow, and thinking about it a day or two later. Wow, that was something like I think I've raised this with you before. One of my favorite renditions of the Frankenstein story is 1973's Frankenstein: A True Story. It was a British film, a two-night film made for TV. David McCullum as Victor Frankenstein, Michael Sarrazin as the creature, Jane Seymour as the love interest. Uh, and to me, what they did with the story was disturbing, even for 1973 on TV. To this day, I still have images in my head from that film and different plot twists and the development they had between David McCullum and Michael Sarrazin, the creature, and Victor. Much deeper, much more intertwined than anything we just saw with the Del Toro. And I'm thinking, are you telling me with a Netflix budget and an Oscar-winning actor, you couldn't do something that impressed me more than a British made for TV movie in 1973? That's my problem.
Yeah, no, and it's all valid. I mean, I'm okay with the fact that he's going to try and do something different with it. I mean, there are a
Mhm.
number of changes to the source material, certainly
There was
about.
some, but nothing that really, even the narration, the backstory narration, it was like right out of for me, Interview with a Vampire. Like it just was so. An Interview with a Vampire just did it so much better. I was just left with in this film. I think what I'm disturbed with is I really wanted to like this film.
Yeah,
Like I
sure.
really wanted to like it. And even when it got to, I kid you not, James, I think I messaged you at one point, watching Frankenstein, not very good, or something like that, something
Right.
very cryptic. And then
That's not
it
very
came up to,
cryptic. You're
well,
not very good.
good. But then it got to part two, the creature's tale. I thought, well, maybe I was a little premature. Maybe
Mm.
this is where we're going to get the other perspective. It's going to fill in the gaps and it's going to ease my heart. And no, it was more of the same. I didn't find their perspectives wildly divergent enough to even warrant to have two different tales. And yeah, it was overall just disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, because there've been so many versions of Frankenstein that you really have to do. I mean, well, let me retract that. There must be a temptation or pressure to feel I've got to do something really different, because otherwise, what's the
We know this
point?
tale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise, what's the point? But then if you go too far, then for audiences, they're like, well, this isn't Frankenstein anymore. This is just you taking the character and running with it. And obviously, that has been done many, many times. I mean, I've seen all of those classic Universal, monster movies. We've reviewed the first one on this channel,
Hmm.
the original James Whale, 1931. But I will hold my hand up and go, well, that's not even the best one of those. I mean, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Ghost of Frankenstein are all, in my opinion, as good as the original James Whale Frankenstein, but none of them really show much respect for the for the book. They just say,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's a great idea," and then they go run with it and do their own thing. But they do lots of really interesting things with it. I still
Yeah.
think, and then obviously all the Hammer horror stuff with Christopher Lee as the monster and all the rest of it. I still think that one of the best adaptations of the book is actually, and we've talked about this before, is actually the stage
Oh,
play,
yes.
the Danny
With
Boyle stage production
Johnny
for
Lee
the
Miller. And
yeah,
yeah.
for the National NFT in London, where it was Johnny Lee Miller and Benedict Cumberbatch. and they would swap roles on alternate nights.
A king, the king of silence. Build me a woman, please. I beg you, a bride. A bride should be beautiful. She should have pretty eyes shining.
I didn't see them at the theatre, but they filmed those and they did it on the NFT Live thing that you can go see at the cinema. We went to both versions of that, like a week apart, and it's fantastic. And it really sort of gives a whole new dimension to the story, the way that it divides up those two stories, and so you follow the creature for a large parts of the play, and see sort of how he learned and how he developed and how he began to understand his own predicament, his own fate, in a way that sort of is sort of the curse of humanity. It's certainly if you're going to look at it from like a religious perspective, it's understanding your limitations and your fate and why you're here and how you've been abandoned and left to your own devices, with no answers and infinite questions and everybody the whole world's against you kind of thing. It's like there's nothing more human than that kind of realization, and it's the monster that has that. I still think that's the best version of Shakespeare. It almost does feel Shakespearean at times.
It does feel Shakespearean. It's a tragedy. Yeah.
But I think that's the best adaptation of Frankenstein I've seen. And so, you hope that when Del Toro finally gets his hands on this material that clearly has had like such a long-lasting influence on all of his work and on his life, that he would have something more to say than he's already said in all of his other things. It seems that just that central conceit of the misunderstood monster is all that he really cares about with it. And I'm sure people are going to have a go at me for saying that, but it does feel like many of the other interesting themes and debates raised in the source material don't seem to interest him to anything like the same degree.
And I just want to add to everything you just said. I like Oscar Isaacs as an actor. I think he's really good. I particularly liked him in like Ex Machina. I felt
now. What's that if it's not a Frankenstein story, huh?
Well, this is where I was kind of making connecting the dots. Was I found him more convincing as the creator in that film than in this film. This film felt very two-dimensional to the point where I almost felt he was miscast. I'm not going to go so far as to say he was miscast because I think he's a brilliant actor. And so I don't know whether it's the dialogue he was given or the story he was given. I don't know if somebody could have done it better. It just felt extremely two-dimensional. Like, okay, now you have to be angry with those around you because they don't understand that you've been given this insight into life and death, and they should be supporting you and not inhibiting you. It's just we've seen that before, where when he was in Ex Machina and he played the creator, there was just this cocky, arrogant, where he was one step ahead of everyone around him. Much more three-dimensional, much more interesting to watch. And I wish he had drawn, or the source material in the film had drawn more from that kind of creator rather than this two-dimensional pseudo madman. The film would have been stronger.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot has been said about the casting of Jacob Elordi as the creature, and that he's just too good looking to play the creature. And I agree. Everyone's been talking about how this is the sexy creature in this version, and it is. And I think it's frustrating because it kind of seems to miss the point that Del Toro has been so obsessed with for all of these years. I mean, the point of the story is that under the surface, the creature is a sympathetic character, right? And can be loved and deserves love, despite the fact that he is hideous in appearance.
Yeah.
But in this version, he is not hideous in appearance, and so it misses the point entirely. The whole point is we need to look beneath the surface. But if the surface is so damn hot, it kind of negates that, even the need to have that degree of empathy. And I was surprised that Del Toro, of all people, made that choice when he's been banging on about this idea for so long.
Yeah, and as a minor critique too, to add to that too, is traditionally, although the Frankenstein creature has always perhaps been stronger than the average person, could exude a measure of strength, which was disproportionate. I'm trying to figure out the science. I'm granted you have to kind of suspend disbelief a little bit to
Hmm.
even imagine somebody being brought back to life, but suddenly he has the regenerative qualities of an alien or a vampire. And I'm thinking he's just been hobbled together with ex-convicts and sewn together. Why is he able to heal bullets and, take a dynamite blast against his chest and then come back? Yes, it's a minor critique considering everything else, but it just, again, it's another thing that makes no sense
Right.
and doesn't help the film unless they had implied something in the creation of the monster where they're going to be able to give him an Iron Man type sensibility. I don't know, but that was never conveyed. So I'm thinking, where does he gather these superhuman powers? I have no idea.
Well, that's it. They've turned him into a superhero,
Yeah,
basically. So, he's now just a misunderstood. He's like Superman, essentially.
He's an X-Man,
Yeah, he's a misunderstood mutant, and then to the point where he can literally regenerate and bring himself back to life, which is again odd for
Yeah,
this interpretation of the story. And then it ends on a far more, I think, optimistic and positive note than the book does. I mean, the book just kind of like the
yeah.
sailors, they leave him out on the ice, but he's like, I'm going to set myself on fire and I'm going to kill myself because
Hmm.
I cannot live in this world. And that's the kind of the tragic denouement
Hmm.
is not that Victor dies, but it's just that the creature basically sort of checks out and just decides I can't do this,
Yeah.
or I shouldn't, or I recognize that I have. Yeah, you can interpret it in a number of ways, but
In this film,
here,
he's left thinking, I'm kind of hot. Why don't I
yeah,
go somewhere where it's warm on the beach and get me a
well,
nice woman?
exactly. It ends with him watching the sunrise, doesn't it? Over the
Yeah,
ice and thinking, maybe I can make a life for myself. Maybe there is hope. There is somewhere for me.
yeah,
And one could argue that, well, in this current climate, we need a little sort of hope. We need the monsters in society to feel that they do have a place, but that's not this story.
hmm
You know,
yeah,
I'm sorry, but because I agree with the sentiment of it, and that is so often the case with I think Del Toro's stuff is I agree with the sentiment. I see where he's going for.
hmm
We do need to stay positive. Even when society pushes back at us, but that is to completely sidestep the tragic
yeah,
conclusion of this rather influential and successful text that's doing quite well just how it is. Thank you very much.
yeah, exactly. James, how are we going to judge Guillermo del Toro's? It's not called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's just
It's just
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Just
Just Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, I
What
believe
are we
so.
going to use? Are we going to use? Yeah,
I
that
mean, but
was.
shouldn't it? It's got to be something a bit more iconic, hasn't it? Just like sort of
Yeah,
super
yeah.
hot, super hot decomposing super zombies or something. I
Yeah,
mean,
that sounds good. Yeah, how many super hot decomposing super
yeah,
zombies?
uncomfortably sexy corpses out of 5. I'll go first this time.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to see it on the big screen. I think that did make a difference. I think it looked great, which clearly did not translate to the Netflix platform. Um, Beyond that, however, I felt it was a frustrating and reductive experience. I think that Del Toro has said all he wanted to say about Frankenstein before this movie, and he kind of left himself with nowhere to go or had exhausted the themes of interest that interested him already. And it just left him sort of spinning his wheels and making poor thematic choices that just sort of essentially undercut the source material. It's not a disaster, and I think there will be audiences coming to this who maybe have never seen or read Frankenstein before, and if this is a gateway to them to be like, okay, well, maybe I should go and look at some of the older versions or read the book now, then great, you know. Other than that, however, I think that in time this will just disappear as yet another adaptation that can be, can be forgotten about. So it's fine, but coming from who it's coming from, a man who is seemingly, born to make this movie, it is disappointing. So I came out of that screening and I gave it 3 out of 5 purely based on the visual spectacle. I suspect if I revisit it, which I haven't, obviously that will only probably be on Netflix, and that may well go down. But for now, I'm happy to stick with that rating of 3. But it comes with all the disappointments and criticisms that we have just spoken about.
No, I agree. This is not a disaster. It was at times mildly enjoyable. And so for me, it's a 2-star movie. This is a 2 decomposing zombie, hot zombie,
Yeah.
whatever if we will designed it as being. It's a 2, and it's disappointingly 2. There's other movies that you'd think, oh, 2, that's pretty good for that movie, but for Guillermo del Toro, I just feel like there was so much left on the table here that was not taken advantage of, and the elements that were engaged with were two-dimensional at best. So we're going to leave it at that. But that's what James and I think about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. What say you? I know I was listening to some of the guys on NPR and they're loving it. There is some love for this film. Where have we missed it? We'd love to hear your comments in the comment box below. James?
Yeah, anyone share our thoughts on Guillermo del Toro? Someone who has all the passion in the world, but for me doesn't translate it up on the big screen. Let me know which is your favorite. And obviously, we're going to be talking favorite Frankenstein adaptations. Let us know.
You still haven't seen the 73 Frankenstein, the True Story. Got to watch that. I'm almost tempted to watch it again this weekend.
I
It's a
queued
good
it up.
one.
I queued it up after our last conversation, which was probably when we did our Halloween Spooktacular episode on James Whale's Frankenstein. Find that. But I haven't yet watched it. So, yeah, I should.
No worries. You'll get there one day.
I will.
Till next episode.
You ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.